Welcome to the Nuts and Bolts of Leadership, the podcast that cuts through the noise to deliver real-world leadership wisdom from the front lines of business. I'm your host, Billy Duren, CEO, curious learner, and passionate student of people and performance. Whether you're leading a team of 10 or 10,000, this show is your go-to resource for creative insights that drive results and build people. Whether you're already in the CEO chair or you're just beginning your journey, this is a theory, it's the nuts and bolts. Let's go to work. All right, everyone, welcome into the meeting room. Today, we're going to be talking about leadership. This is the Nuts and Bolts of Leadership podcast. I'm the host, Billy Duren. I'm excited to have my good friend Jimmy Messer in the meeting room today. Jimmy's the head of school at Presbyterian Christian School in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Jimmy, welcome to the podcast.
Man, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So today, Jimmy, we're going to kind of explore leadership and education and really because of your coaching history, I want to connect some of the dots between coaching and leadership.
Yeah.
Interestingly, we've had CEOs from all over the country, leaders from all over the country that come in, and we talk about the thing that comes up often is people who influence people in their lives, some of these leaders, and they talk about coaches. So when I mentioned coaching, Jimmy earlier in his career was twice named Junior College Coach of the Year in basketball. I've watched Jimmy's career as he soared to the top of every endeavor, including his success in college administration as a dean of students, director of student development, and as the athletic director. So, Jimmy, I've kind of titled this today as the court, culture, and campus. So we're going to combine all these things, talk about how we can bring these things together. So, Jimmy, you've been coaching leaders for years, and it may seem like a lifetime ago, but how has your basketball coaching experience helped shape your leadership style as now you're leading teams of educators?
It's funny you asked that question because when I first became the head of school at Cottage Hill Christian Academy, all my friends said, Jimmy, you run a school like you coached your basketball team. I'm not really sure that was a compliment at the time, maybe, but I think it does. As I said, I kind of lead like I coached a little bit, but I think one thing for me is I always felt like one of my strengths, some people are really good at developing players and they're a great offensive guy, defensive guy. I thought one of my strengths was taking whatever we had and building a team and using their strengths and using their skills and putting them in the right place. And a lot of times on an admin team or a teaching team, sometimes you have the right people on the bus, but you maybe don't have them on the right seat. And I think that's something we've done here a little bit. We've kind of moved some people around since I got here. This is my third year. We've added some, we've moved some around, and we've kept some in the same seat. So I think that's one of the things about coaching a team that's very similar is just using their skills, using their strengths, molding them together. Obviously you hope motivating people and, kind of is a part of that. But I think that's part of molding them together is motivating them and getting them to buy into a common purpose, a common goal. So that's one of the things that, that we try to do. But I think probably the biggest thing is just taking a group of people, getting them in the right seat on the bus, using their skills, their strengths to better our team.
So, Jimmy, when we bring CEOs, and we've 52 episodes or so now, 75% of those episodes have involved people leading organizations. We've had other interviews that weren't necessarily with CEOs, but when I ask a CEO, what are you looking for in a leader, the number one thing that comes back for them is coachable. So how would you define that? What is coachable? So this is a great athlete. And so explain both sides of that. I got this great athlete that is coachable. Then I got this other great athlete. He's not interested in being coached.
I think a lot of that in terms of being coachable is just being someone who puts the team first. I think a lot of times when you're not coachable, it's because you have individual desires and wants, and it's more about what you want than it is the team wants. So, most people that are coachable are really looking out for the team. And, I've been blessed. I didn't have a whole lot of kids that I thought were just totally uncoachable, and if we did, they weren't with us very long, but occasionally you did have some that you had to work a little more to help them understand things. But once you kind of get people, when I was coaching in junior college, we actually lost a couple players the year we won the state championship my third year, and they were pretty good players. And I was really worried about it. In the game after we lost them, our two captains walked in, knocked on my door, walked in the office, and they said, "Hey, can we talk to you?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "What's up?" And I really thought they were coming in to go, I won't call the two guys' names, but hey, Coach, we got to have them. You got to go get them. And they said, Coach, let them go. I said, what do you mean? They said, they don't buy into our system. They can't play here. They don't understand what we're about. We went on. We were going to be really good, I thought. We weren't very deep anymore, but our team really gelled. We went 27-6 and won the state championship because those guys, it was their team. It wasn't my team anymore. It was their team because they understood. They didn't agree with everything that I might want them to do, but they understood that it was for the greater good of the team, and they bought in. So they were coachable, and I think sometimes those that aren't coachable are really more concerned with what they want to do. So
Jimmy, you say that those that aren't coachable may not be with you very long. What does that conversation look like? So if you got somebody you can see that they're trying to put their initiatives ahead of the team, what does a Jimmy putting their arm around a guy sound like when you start seeing this stuff? What does that sound like?
It's probably a little different, with maybe players than it is with somebody on our staff here. Here you're going to approach a little bit different because they're an adult and they're a little older. And not that you talk down to the athlete, but it's a little different. You show them things, you try to convince them and show them through their actions and through things that we've seen. Use examples. I think sometimes of somebody who has bought in and how here's a guy who doesn't have the talent of you, but they bought into what we're doing. And they've surpassed you because they've bought into what we're doing. And they don't have to always agree totally with everything we're doing here. We had a conversation with an employee not too long ago, and somebody we love and somebody who's really good. But there's a couple of things we were a little disappointed in. And they were like, well, why are we having this conversation? I want to understand where you're at. I want to understand how, what you were thinking in that situation. Maybe it was a total misunderstanding. Or maybe there's a philosophy difference here that we need to either, number one, see if we can get on the same page, and that's what that conversation was. It wasn't anything about them not being here, but, just trying to make sure people are on the same page. And I think it looks different according to who you're dealing with and what their position is and what their issue is about not buying in or not being coachable, because it's different with different people.
So I love that. I love that phrase, help me understand. I think that kind of punts it back over to whether you're dealing with an executive or whether you're dealing with a player. Help me understand kind of where you are in this situation. Also was just reminded, Jimmy, of one of my mentors years ago told me that humility will take you places ability never will. So becoming a part of the team and buying into the concepts. So talking a little bit now today about the cord and how that connects to leadership and culture. Jimmy, I just recently wrote a little post about this. I heard this great story about this mom who took her 4-year-old to the Georgia Aquarium in Atlanta. The 4-year-old's first impression to his mom was, "Mom, look at all the water." You don't really think about when you walk into the aquarium about seeing all the water. You're used to having somebody saying, look at the big shark or look at all the fish. But when we consider the responsibility of leaders to create an atmosphere, environment, sort of the water, for our teams to be successful, how are you intentionally shaping and sustaining a strong, values-driven culture on your staff?
One thing is we have to make sure we hire leaders and put people in leadership positions that buy into our culture. And then those leaders have to model whatever that culture or that expectation is. If we're not modeling it for them, like we talk with a lot about servant leadership and what does that mean and different things. But for us, I was like, I talk to our teachers, and I mean, if we're walking across campus and we see a piece of trash, we need to pick it up, because if we expect those kids to pick it up, then we need to pick it up. It doesn't go quite as far if I stop and go, "Hey, Johnny," and occasionally I do this. I may be headed, "Hey, Johnny, will you go pick that paper up there and put it in the trash can for me?" But hopefully they've seen me model that before that. And I saw a thing the other day, it's talking about 4 different types of workers. And one of them is they see something, they go do it right away. You don't have to tell them they do it. The second one, you ask them to do it, they come back and say, "Hey, do you need anything else?" The third one, they do exactly what you tell them to do, but they come back and they don't necessarily look for something else to do. And the fourth one, you got to go find them, and I think, for us, just, you want people that just see something, see it needs to be done and do it. And if they do that, then other people on their staff are going to do that. And I'm really blessed. My elementary principal and my secondary campus director are both like that. They see a problem, they go take care of it. They're not always saying, "Hey, you do this, you do that." Now, there's times we have to do that, obviously, but they're modeling the culture. They're modeling what we want to be, and we want to be problem solvers. And, we taught our kids about they need to critical think more. Well, part of critical thinking is problem solving. So let's have people on our staff that are solving problems and modeling that for their staff, that type of thing. So I think that's one thing. You got to reward those that have actions that are consistent with your culture. But then I think the biggest thing, and it's the hardest thing, is you got to be willing to have tough conversations with people that aren't modeling your culture, because, the rewarding's great, but if they see somebody over here that's, like for us, one might be, and it's a perfect, I spent 2 months here before I took over, and our school started at 8:15 and our teacher was supposed to be here at 7:45. And this person got here at 8:10 every day. And I had not taken over yet. And I told somebody on the staff that already worked here, I said, she's not going to make it very long. Well, at the beginning of the next year, we laid out our expectations. She was on time every day. She had never really been asked to be, or it had never really been reinforced to be there at 7:45. But if she comes at 7:45 every day and I let somebody else come at 8:10, then I'm not, we're not really rewarding that. And and hey, obviously things happen. Your dog gets sick. Your car breaks down. Not, but is their consistency of doing what we ask them to do. Communication is a big one for us. Communicating with parents. If you're not communicating with parents, we're going to sit down and have a conversation with you about that, because we're expecting everybody to do that, and you need to do that.
I think the nugget here is the modeling piece of it. I mean, because we want to, oftentimes we just talk about what we're doing wrong. So adding to what we're doing right, catching people in what they're doing right, hiring the right people. I heard all those things in this piece. And when we're doing those things and seeing the results of them, then we're winning. And I couldn't help but think about, winning's important. We've been talking about sports a little bit. Winning's important and in everything. But what does winning look like today, Jimmy? So how are you encouraging your teams to reach? Basketball and the sports analogies, I mean, we know them all. But today, when you pull this down into your executive teams, your leadership teams, administrative teams, how are you encouraging them to reach? And then what does winning look like?
It's funny that you asked that question, because number one, I am a coach. It's at heart, I guess. I'm still a scoreboard guy, right? I still need something to kind of, but we had a parent in recently who was the CEO of a very successful company here in town, and he was a really impressive guy. And towards the end, I was so excited because he said, we look at the scoreboard. And so I'm like, they have logistics is one of the companies they have. He said, we got to have so many loads this day. That truck's got to do 4 loads. If they don't do 4 loads, then we're not reaching our, and so it was encouraging to me that they look at the scoreboard, and it's not just us coaches, because sometimes I wonder if our people think I look at the scoreboard too much, but, so we do look at enrollment and retention and giving and those type of things, but we look at them as a metric to say, hey, if our teachers are doing the job in the classroom, then our retention is going to be good. If our teachers are doing I told our teachers in service this year, and our enrollment's second highest it's been in 11 years, and our elementary enrollment's the highest it's been in 7 years. And we were talking about, I said, we have a really good social media person. Young lady does an awesome job. People all the time are like, man, y'all social media is so much better. But she can put all the pretty pictures out there that she wants. But if you're not doing the job in the classroom as a teacher, we're going to lose. My wife's our admissions director for about another 2 weeks. She's decided she doesn't want to work for the boss anymore, I think, and she's going to go home. But, no, she's going to take some time off, and we've hired another young lady who's going to do a great job. But April's really good at what she does. But it doesn't matter how much she sells it. She might talk them into coming, but they're not going to stay if we're not delivering on what we've said who we are, if our teachers aren't doing the job in the classroom. So I think a lot of that is hard. There are metrics. Our enrollment, our retention, our giving, but some of it is the smiles on the faces of our students. Some of it is making sure that we're seeing that every student has a chance to reach their God-given potential. I do exit interviews with our seniors, and I split them up into groups of about 10 or 12, and so it ends up being about 7, and we have lunch together, and I've got several questions I ask them. Tell me something we do really well here. Tell me something we don't do very well. Tell me who's had the greatest impact on you during your time here. And that's just a sampling of some of the questions. And I get a lot of feedback there. I can see whether we're winning by the answers that they give me, and if they give us good answers about things that we're doing well, programs we're doing well, and I kind of phrase when I say, what are we doing well? I say, what's one thing that we do that you're like, don't ever stop doing this. This is great. Something else you don't understand, and at the end, I give them a chance to kind of say, is there just anything else that you want to tell me, that type of thing. But things like that give us an opportunity to see if we're winning, the feedback from our parents, the conversations we have. And, so those are ways I think we look at it.
I love the communication you're doing, particularly the exit interviews. But I'm also thinking about, Jimmy, when we have great social media campaigns and all of us try to put those campaigns out there, I also wonder about what our internal communication is like with our own staff, because if we're communicating that we're this great organization externally, but we're not doing those things internally, what is our internal staff saying? What is our team saying on the inside? So it's another great point. So Jimmy, if you and I were kind of jumping on an escalator and you had like 45 seconds to pitch me, why is Presbyterian Christian School such a great place? What's the 90-second pitch on why this school is a great place to be?
United in our faith, pursuing excellence. We're going to hang our hat on the fact that we're a Christian school, that we want your child to grow in their faith. We're going to have people in the classroom that are speaking life into your student. But you know what? We're not going to apologize for pursuing excellence in every area. That's in our spiritual development. That's in our academics. That's in our athletics. That's in our fine arts and our facilities. We're not going to, I think sometimes as Christians, we like that word excellence is not something that we should talk about. God wants us to be excellent. He wants us to be the best. Now, we can do what we do within within our restrictions of our capabilities or our resources. It's like when I was coaching, I can't take a kid that's got 2 talent and turn them into a 10, but maybe I can take a kid with 2 talent and turn them into 4, to a 4, and so I think for us, just, United in faith, pursuing excellence. We came up with that phrase about 18 months ago because we were looking for something to define our school. And when we were at Cottage Hill, we used faith, family, future, because we thought it really described who we were. And it gave us the elevator speech, which you just said. We call it all the time. Hey, so this is the way for our parents to say, hey, you asking me about PCS, well, here's PCS. And relationships are very important to us. And I think that kind of goes in that united faith. We're united, in our faith in pursuing one Savior there, but we're also pursuing excellence in every area because of what He's given us.
Well, I've known you for a long time, and I can see you getting excited about that school and loving the position you're in. Presbyterian Christian has got a great leader, dynamic, authentic leader, and Jimmy Messer. So, Jimmy, what are one of the biggest challenges, maybe the greatest joys of leading a team of passionate educators?
I think that's a really good question. And I think the challenges, and I think I mentioned earlier, is we're dealing with adults, here. When I was coaching kids in college, they went to class, they came to practice, and they went and hung out. And that was all they had. They didn't have a family at home. They didn't have responsibilities. They didn't have, those type of, they didn't have, they might have had some preconceived notions or preconceived opinions or preconceived habits or already created habits, but that's even more with an adult sometimes. And I think when you come into, like I came in, PCS was a good school a long time before Jimmy Messer got here. It's going to be a good school a long time after I leave. But there were some changes that we made, and there were a couple of areas that we felt like, and I think our former administrator and I've talked about it, they had kind of gone through a little bit of them. He was here, COVID hit, he was kind of getting ready to retire, stayed a little longer. They hired someone, the hire didn't work out, was only here 9 months. He came back and just kind of kept it between the lines or, for a while. So when we came in, we started looking at some things, and it was tough for some of our teachers that had been here a long time because we were speaking a different language maybe. We were looking at some things differently. Not wrong, not right, just different. And, and they were having to maybe get outside their comfort zone. We maybe were challenging them to look at teaching a little different. Or we were challenging them. One of the things we've done at PCS is we really looked at our learning center, which we call PAUSE, Pursuing Academics with Support, and looking at our students that had maybe a learning difference. Maybe they're ADD, maybe they're ADHD, maybe they have dyslexia, maybe they have dysgraphia, and so they have some of those. And so we've really increased our program there because we want to, and that wasn't as big a focus before I got here. We've added to our STEM program. We've added Spanish. We've added all of our kids take Spanish at least 3 days a week in the elementary. So we've added some programs that have, and getting people to buy into that and see the importance of that. I think it's a little bit harder with adults maybe sometimes than it is with young people. They're a little quicker to put faith in you maybe than someone a little older or a little more established, or maybe they have a certain type leader that they're used to or like, and my style comes in and maybe I'm a little different, and I may be a little more excited, maybe, I don't know, maybe a little more hyper as we were talking about earlier before the podcast. So I think those are some of the challenges, is just kind of working through those, but ours has been really good. And I think it's one thing that's really helped us here is they had not had a lot of stability. We do a senior retreat when we start out the year. We take our seniors on a retreat. And the class of 25, I was sitting in the back of the room at their retreat, and it hit me. They'd had 4 different campus directors in 4 years. But that meant our teachers had had 4 different bosses in 4 years on that campus. And sometimes we would sit in meetings and we would wonder, just were we connecting? But I think they were kind of waiting to see, hey, is this person going to be here next year? Are they going to be? Now I've been here 3 years. Dr. Rice has been here 3 years. Our secondary campus director has been here 2 years. Our elementary principal's been here for about 8 years, but she's new in her role. It's on her second year, but she's known by everybody on campus. So there's some stability, some consistency, and they get trust. And I think the trust takes longer with an adult. Once you get it, I think it sticks maybe a little better with the young people. It might go up and down a little bit according, by different things. But I think once you earn that trust and you show them that, hey, even though we may look at things a little different, we all have one goal of making Presbyterian Christian School the best it can be. And that's what we're striving for. And we do you were talking about internal feedback. I did a teacher survey last spring and let them give some feedback. It was an anonymous survey. And there was, a couple of things in there, to be honest. I had to really take a look at myself and our staff, because there was, most of it was really positive, but there were a few things that, hey, but one thing that we got really high marks on, that they believed we had the school's best interest at heart. And that meant a lot to our staff. Even though they disagreed with some things over here, they gave us really high marks. The highest percentage of really any of the question was that they believed that we were trying to move Presbyterian Christian forward. And so I think just it takes a little longer. You've got to be consistent, maybe with those that have been around a little longer, your adults, than maybe with some of your younger kids here.
So, Jimmy, years ago, and I'm talking about years ago, earlier in my career, I was a theme slogan kind of guy. I was always, come up with what's our slogan for the year, whatever it takes, pursuing excellence, whatever it might be. But I think, to speak to your point here, you guys have created some stability that, kind of like changing offensive coordinators, our quarterbacks coach every year. Now you've implemented a system, and the language begins to be consistent. They begin to understand what the slogans are and what this saying means. So we've talked about this a lot, that every culture has a language. And once your systems get in place, instead of jumping from theme from year to year to year, there is something about that. And, you talked a lot about the student experience. And then, now I can hear how the parents are beginning to see, okay, now we got a system that we can believe in. The educators that are on your team is believing in it. Now the system is starting to engage. So I'm just impressed with how you guys are moving towards building the model. And I'm going to come back to the model. You talked about this earlier, how we're modeling the culture, not just talking about it. We're implementing this model. So when you look at the parental side of this, we talked about the student experience. What are you saying to the parents now about, okay, we have this model, we have this system, we believe in our system, our team is all pulling in the same direction. How has that affected your relationship with the parents?
Well, I guess that might be a better question for some of our parents, but I think, I think we've been very intentional. And it's funny, you were talking about slogans and word for the year. My first year here, our word was impact, and it really resonated. Last year, our word was growth, and we didn't feel like it resonated as much. And we were kind of thinking about not even having a word this year, and we kind of got feedback from our seniors. They wanted a word, and one of the words we're considering is intentional. But I think being intentional with our parents, we try to provide opportunities. In the 2 years I've been here, they've had a lot of opportunities because of some different things. They got to come in and give feedback about the school and the direction during the head of school search. And then we did a strategic plan, and we had a lot of focus groups meetings, and they had an opportunity to come in and rate us in certain areas and talk about what they wanted from PCS and what was their desire. What did we do well? What did we not do well? Well, then now this year, we're in a capital campaign where we did a feasibility study before we did our capital campaign. We brought a consulting group in, J.F. Smith Group, and they've done a great job. But once again, our parents got to come in and kind of give feedback, and we've gotten a lot of feedback from them through that. But a lot of conversations, it's a good and bad. I think I'm a fairly relational person, but and sometimes that can come back to bite you when you're in a leadership position, when you get to know people. But I think we've been able to build some good relationships with our parents. We've tried to get to know people. We've tried to involve them. Our PTO is very active. Our Bobcat Club, which is our booster club, has really grown. And just, interacting with them. And if they see, hopefully our consistency, we're not perfect. They know that. We know that. We're not perfect. But if they believe that our intentions are to provide the best experience for their students and they see us working. Tom Johnson was the head of school at Bayside Academy for a long time. And he said, Jimmy, you always got to have something happening on your campus. People want to see things happening, want to see things moving. And I think that's one thing we try to do is we try to keep a new program, a new building, a new something, because we want them to know that, hey, we're wanting to improve your experience. We're raising money right now for a 14,700 square foot multi-purpose facility that we've needed, and we've done some things with our curriculum, those type of things. I think those show them that we're intentional. We're not just talking about it. We're trying to put some action to our words.
Jimmy, I appreciate that. And we got a couple more questions for you. We're going to take a real quick break. We're with Jimmy Messer. He's the head of school at Presbyterian Christian. This is the Nuts and Bolts of Leadership podcast, and we'll be right back.
Threaded Fasteners is a 100% employee-owned company with a mission to create value in and for the people we serve. If you're interested in learning more about our people-centric culture or need a customized fastener solution, send us an email at culture@threadedfasteners.com. That's culture@threadedfasteners.com.
All right, everyone, we're back in the meeting room with Jimmy Messer. And Jimmy, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, in what ways does the student experience influence your leadership decisions? Because after that, I want to kind of follow up on what's the experience that the students will look back and talk about you. But first of all, let's just tackle this. In what ways does the student experience influence your decisions?
Well, we talk a lot about holistic education. And, I think I learned myself a lot by experience and about watching other people, being around good people, having good mentors, that type of thing. So we're really big on the outside the classroom learning. Obviously, an academics are a given, non-negotiable. We've got to make sure that we're doing a good job in the classroom. But we've started a 7th grade retreat since we've been here. We started an 8th grade trip to Washington, D.C., which is just a great trip for our kids to get to go. There's no parents. It's just them and some of our staff. They have to learn to kind of, navigate some things on their own. They get to learn a lot about our country. They get to see how God used the word to kind of influence our country. We have a senior retreat that we start off the year. We have tribes. This is something we're really, really, and it's something we want to keep getting better at. But I think it's a really cool deal. Is every one of our kids is in a tribe, and it's basically if you go to a Baptist church, it's basically a small group. And everybody kind of has a small group, and we do. We do chapel every week, but we do, I call it our big church chapel. Like our 10, 11, 12 will go to a corporate worship. But that same week, our 7, 8, 9 will go to a tribe. They're named after the 12 tribes of Israel. Our staff lead them. We got a new curriculum we're going to put in there this year. This gives them an opportunity, one, to get to know a couple of staff members better, build a relationship, somebody they know, somebody they trust they can go to. Number 2, we try to mix them up. Don't let them be with their best friends. They build some new relationships. They stay with the same tribe, 7, 8, 9. Then they stay with the same tribe, 10, 11, 12. And we're hoping to eventually work it to where maybe they're leading the tribes. And so this is a way to something different that not a lot of other people do. But it's outside the classroom in a way, learning. We do community service. Be the hands and feet of Jesus. Each one of our grades, 7th through 12th grade, we take them off campus for a day during the year, and they go do community service. They might go to a nursing home. They might go to a food pantry. They might go to, we have Worthy Stables here in town where they, they might go out there and help clean up. There's just different things that they do and go and kind of get out. And, instead of buying a case of water, bringing them us and us shipping them off to somebody, which we do that some too, but we want them to go out and actually be the hands and feet of Jesus, do some things there. And so that outside the learning, so it affects our decisions because that's very important to us. And so, as we make decisions about programs, about our daily schedule, about what we need to do next in terms of facilities, what new staff member we need. It really drives that quite a bit. Athletics, making sure we got the right people in there. Fine arts, we added a full-time fine arts person 2 years ago. We didn't have a full-time fine arts person. We did in our creative arts and in our art class, but we didn't in our drama and music and that type of thing. Now we have a full-time person, a graduate William Carey, a young man named Cam, and Cam has just been an all-star. He's a stud, man. He just does a great job, and that's been, something, just having good coaches and people there. So it influences that decision making because that's important to us, and we really want that experience to be something they look back on and they say, hey, man, I remember being in this tribe. I remember this community service project. I remember our senior trip. Remember our senior retreat when we, did this in the talent show. And, one thing I think our eighth graders, this year's ninth graders, are going to remember is we were on our eighth grade trip and we went to this really cool barbecue shop and a barbecue restaurant, and they had a stage. And so we were back there in this big room, and our kids were like, can we get up on the stage and perform? And so we asked, there was nobody in there but us, and we asked, they were like, sure. Yeah. And so Cam, who was on the trip with us, put together like a talent show just off the cuff. And the kids still talk about, some of the people that got up there that they didn't expect would get up there and do something. These are just memories. Some of it's learning, some of it's memories, some of it's just growing up and having opportunities. So it really affects us and our partners, our parent partnership. I think it affects that too, because we sell that experience, that's what we want to do. So it helps us with them because they see us actually adding some of those. We have kindergarten and 12th grade buddies. Every kindergartner has a 12th grader that's their buddy, and they get together about once a month and do something. They walk down the halls at graduation. They do a senior walk, which a lot of people do with the kindergartner walks down the hall with their senior graduate. Just, mentorship, somebody to look up to. Our kids learning that, hey, there's somebody there that is looking up to me, that it is important how I act and what they see me do. So there's a lot of things there. I guess you could spend an hour just talking about that, but yeah, it's very important to us.
Well, the things that you've been talking about is a culture, and creating a culture that people can come forth, thrive in the pursuit of excellence, as you've said. And, Jimmy, when you look back, so one of these days when Jimmy Messer is gone and these kids are graduated, what do you hope that they're going to say about the time that they spent, not just the kids, but the other educators under your leadership? What's the legacy look like for Jimmy Messer?
I think one thing I would hope that both the kids and the staff would say is that I was all in, that I gave everything I had to make our school the best it could be. We wanted our school, we talk about students reaching their God-given potential. Well, let's make sure our team, our organization, our whatever reaches its God-given potential. And, I talked about earlier that PCS was a good school a long time before I got here. It'd be a good school a long time after I leave. But right now our charge is, while we're here, make it the best it can be. And so I hope that they look back and say, Jimmy was all in. He gave everything he had, and that hopefully through everything that we do, they realize that we truly cared about them, and we were in their corner, and we were going to go to bat for them. Sometimes that's tough love. Sometimes that's, patting them on the back and being whatever. But hopefully they realized we were all in. We gave everything we had. That we were in their corner, and we wanted what was best for them, and that we're still here. And I've got some players that I don't talk to a lot in my career and employees, and I got others that I text with every week. And that I still hear from. And it kind of so your message resonates different with different people, and you have different relationships. But hopefully they would all appreciate the fact that I worked hard and gave them everything I had.
So, Jimmy, I love the all in, and particularly the our charge part of this. We are charged for a season for what we're supposed to do, and following after and pursuing after that all in is inspirational to me, because I love the way that you frame that up. So, Jimmy, just a couple of things that now AI has entered into the picture with almost everybody we talk to, and there are tools, all sorts of things. How are you guys handling the impact of AI coming into the students' worlds these days?
I think that's really evolving a lot. We've had to look at our policies and look at different things and how we approach that, and educating them on how to use it accurately. I would say that I don't think we have have totally cornered the market on that. I think it's something that's still evolving with us. I was actually talking with our secondary campus administrator today, and she had produced something with AI and showed it to our teachers, and they were all shocked that AI produced that. So I think sometimes just educating them on what AI can do, how powerful it is, but it can also be an advantageous thing too if you use it correctly. But it's amazing what it can do, and just working with our teachers to make sure that our students are doing their work and they're not producing AI work, that type of thing. And we've had some policies and some different things that we've looked at there, but I don't know that we've cornered the market on that. We've sat in on several conferences about it, and it's still it's something that may be over my head a little bit. But when we were doing our strategic plan, it kind of blew our mind. We plugged in, as we were working on our strategic plan, we plugged in Christian School, Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Man, it was about 70% of what we wanted. We plugged in Christian School, Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and entered our mission statement. It was almost all this stuff that we had taken 6 months putting together, they put together in 30 seconds. And it was amazing how close it was. It just kind of shows you the power of it. But you can't let that replace, one thing for us, like making sure our common language, you were talking about language. AI is not necessarily going to get our language. It's going to produce something that's kind of a stock thing, and making sure that we have our language. And for the students, the same way, there's a certain heart about you when you write and when you do things that AI can't reproduce, but it can help you. I would be honest, I've had to write a tough email before, and I've put something in there to get at least a starting point because I was struggling to get started, and then it got me started, and then I kind of go and write it. So I'm just kind of helping them learn how to use it effectively, how powerful it is, and just, but it's evolving, man. We're not there.
We just recently had matter of fact, our podcast episode right before this one was about the tools, the AI tools, and the things that are coming, and the approach that organizations, even educators, are taking. So a lot of things out there developing that. So Jimmy, sort of winding up and moving more to the personal story, because we like to ask everyone that comes on the podcast, who's someone that you could remember, whether it's an educator or coach, somebody that made an impact on you, and how did that impact shape and model the way your leadership style has developed today?
Man, I've been so blessed as a coach to have worked with some really good guys and really good coaches and really good educators. I've got 2 or 3 that I call and bug every week with questions, and I could probably give an answer for every one of them. But my second year out of college, I was a graduate assistant at Columbus State in Columbus, Georgia, for a guy named Herb Green, who's passed away now. And Coach Green was, he was probably one of the ultimate players, coaches, and just a really good guy, really cared about his players, really took care of them. And at that point, Columbus State's changed a little bit since then. We had the worst gym in the league. We didn't have a very high budget. I was basically the full-time assistant, and I was a GA making $3,200 my first year. And we didn't have a lot, but we were still pretty good because he figured out a way. But I used to tell people all the time, Coach Green might ask me to clean the bathrooms before the game on Saturday, but he's probably in the stall right next to me, and so I think that probably, he was just a guy that just loved people, loved his players, was willing to do whatever he needed to do for them to be successful. And I think it goes back to what I was talking about, what I want people to remember me for. There's probably some things they'll remember me for that I don't want to be remembered for, but I hope at least they remember, what Jimmy gave everything he had. He didn't ask me to do anything he wouldn't do. And so I think that was one thing is, Coach Green, he modeled that for us, big time. But, I've really been blessed to work with some great people.
Well, Jimmy, when you look back on Coach Green and those others that have come along and helped you develop who you are, what advice do you now turn around? So if we had a young emerging leader here in the room, whether it was a young coach or a young educator sitting here in the room with us, what would be your advice to them on how they get started on their own journey? What counsel do you give them today?
Be you. Stay true to yourself. I talked about all the different people I worked for, and Herb Green, great coach, worked at all of them, recruited Charles Barkley. He's in several Hall of Fames. Scott Sanderson's dad was Wimp Sanderson. Scott's done a really good job at finished second at Country University Mobile, won a bunch of ball games, still winning ball games. Bill Elder was in the NAIA Hall of Fame. Pat Taylor is an administrator that passed away about 9 months ago, who they just recognized that at UMS Leadership Conference here not too long ago. Just an unbelievable guy who was a mentor to me, and Terry Sellers was a coach. But I took a little bit. I couldn't be Herb Green and I couldn't be Bill Elder. I had to be Jimmy Messer and take a little bit of what all they gave me and brought to the table and try to take a little bit of who they were and what they are. We were talking the other day about someone that had left our staff and they were doing some of the same things we're doing. And somebody said, "Does that bother you?" I was like, "You think I invented that?" No, it doesn't bother me. I stole that from somebody else. Hey, I'm glad that he's taking that and doing that in his school, because I think it's going to make his school better. So I think imitation is the greatest form of flattery. But be true to yourself, surround yourself with good people, learn from those people, watch what they do. I'm watch, listen, and learn, and I think that's, for me, that's really how I learned, and everything I do in education and in schools is something I saw somebody else do. And a lot of them do it a whole lot better than I do, but we try our best to imitate what they do. And I think another thing, and I tell young coaches this all the time, but I think it goes to leaders too, is you got to celebrate the wins. Because as a coach, I'll do the coaching first. As a coach, if we won, well, we were supposed to win. Let's move on. Who's next? If we lost, we beat ourselves up for 3 or 4 days till we play the next game. We're the worst coach in the world. Bill Elder, I love Coach Elder, but when he was at University of Mobile, we would ride on it. If it was a road game and we lost, we would redo our entire program all the way home. We were going to change the way we practiced, the way we played, everything we did, our rotation, everything, because we lost that game. But then when we won, we just moved on to the next one. Celebrate the wins. And I think from a leadership standpoint, where that comes in is, in schools or in your business, we deal with some tough stuff sometimes. We deal with some messy stuff. We're human beings, right? We're flawed individuals, and we deal with some tough stuff. So when you get that note from that kid that says, "Thank you for what you did," man, even if it's just you yourself, celebrate that. If your staff has a win, celebrate that, because you know what? We're going to be sitting here next week going, like, how are we going to tackle this issue? And we've got to balance that by really celebrating the wins. And so I think that would be probably the biggest thing for me is be you, stay true to yourself, watch, listen, and learn, kind of take what you get, put it together with who you are, and then celebrate the wins, because, it's a fun journey. We get to see some good stuff. I won't go into any details, because we had it was a small thing, but a big win yesterday with one of our students. And, and just kind of have to celebrate those, because you're going to deal with, something tough, about in a couple of weeks or something, that you have to make a tough decision, or you have a tragedy or whatever. So.
Well, Jimmy, those are great words. I love the celebrate the win. We've often talked about that in our offices. Make sure that we stop to celebrate the wins. Great wisdom nuggets from Jimmy Messer. Jimmy, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you or someone about your school, what would be the best way for them to contact you?
Our website is pcsk12.org. My email is jmesser@pcsk12.org. So, I think either one of those would be a great way to get in touch with us. We love to show people what we have, love to share with them who we are and what we're doing. And we have a really good team here. And so, if anybody was ever interested in know, even not just a student, if there's somebody out there that at a school and just wants to come visit and see some of the things we do, because we love to go to other schools. It's something we do a lot. We have, and here they have this thing called MAIS does safaris, and you go and visit like 5. We'll go to Little Rock, Arkansas, and visit 5 schools. Go to Baton Rouge and visit some schools. Go to Nashville. We went to Nashville last year just to see how different people do things. And you might take a little nugget here, a little nugget there that you can bring back and make your place better. So we'd love to spend some time with anybody that wants to talk about education, talk about PCS, and see what we do.
Well, Jimmy, I appreciate you taking time for us on the podcast today, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Thanks a lot. It was great. Enjoyed it.
I'll be right back with some closing thoughts. Great episode with Jimmy Messer. Jimmy is the head of school at Presbyterian Christian. I love Jimmy's passion. I've known Jimmy for so long. I love the way he approaches not only his leadership journey, but he loves people. And Jimmy's always going to rally around people. And I love the nuggets that he dropped on us at the end. Be you, watch, listen, and learn, celebrate the wins. And what a great thing for leaders to hear is to celebrate the wins. I know that I'm guilty of always asking, okay, what's next? But don't forget to ask, what's now? What do we celebrate today? And kind of that stop to smell the roses thing that we've heard for years. Learn how to celebrate the wins with your team. We're already looking forward to our next episode. We're going to stay on the line of education. We're going to have Dr. Stacy Wellborn on the impacts of teaching leadership at the college level. So this is the nuts and bolts of leadership. And until we see you again, tighten up.
Thank you for tuning in to the Nuts and Bolts of Leadership podcast, brought to you by the proud employee owners of Threaded Fasteners. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe to, rate, and review the Nuts and Bolts of Leadership wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Do you have a leadership story to tell or a question to ask? We'd love to hear from you. Email us at podcast@threadedfasteners.com. That's podcast@threadedfasteners.com. This show is made possible by our family at Threaded Fasteners, Inc., where our mission is to create value in and for the people we serve. Interested in learning more about TFI and how we create value in our team, in our community, and in our customers? Visit us at threadedfasteners.com. Thanks again for listening. This show is edited and produced by Johnny Glenn and our friends at Deep Fried Studios.